Hello and welcome to Bookish and the Balance, the podcast that talks all about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful of mental health in the queer book community. I'm Adrienne J. Smith.
I'm Amy Spencer. Totally forgot the order there. Sorry, that's a good start.
And I'm Katie Trapp.
We all have a state of mental health and we neglect talking about it, or worse yet, we're ashamed to talk about it. So let's break that stigma. And on today's episode, we're interviewing the author Ray Spangler, which I'm excited for. I met you in Albuquerque, right? Was that the first time? You were in Albuquerque, right?
Yeah, I think Albuquerque was the first time. I was scanning. I was like, did we meet before that? But we've known each other online before that.
Yeah, but I don't think we actually met until
I think
GCLS in Albuquerque. Because that's the first GCLS I ever went to.
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah. Can you, just for people who don't know you, because I'm sure there's at least one person out there who doesn't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the books that you write?
Yeah, I write sapphic romance novels. Number 25 will come out in the next week or two if all goes to plan. They are largely lesbian fiction with a little bit of bisexual characters thrown in. I've definitely got a couple non-binary characters and another one in the works. So they all fall within the heading of sapphic. They are all romances because I believe in the transformative power of love. So that's what I write and that's what I plan to keep writing. But yeah, there's 25 of them, so there's a little bit of something for everybody. I have done a lot of sports romances, some travel romances, a little bit of foodie stuff, small town, big city. I'm trying to cover all the bases. So anybody wants anything sapphic, you can come to me and I'll help you find something you like.
Hasn't your next one you've just done your cover reveal for your next one I saw today?
Yeah, I did do the cover reveal for the next one is called Informed Consent. So you guys picked an amazing time to get a hold of me because Informed Consent is the first in what will hopefully become a series about a practice of mental health professionals.
Awesome.
I was like, that's not what I took from the title, but I love the title.
Yes. Yeah. So my last book was called Quiver, and it was kind of a sports celebrity romance. And it probably got a little darker. I mean, it's still a really sappy romance, but there were a couple scenes that people were like, wow, she's tough. She's an ice queen. Maybe they're both ice queens back and forth. And my wife started calling it dubious consent, and this one informed consent. So I'm in a much healthier place now. Informed Consent is a much better mental health book.
So I'm running off of what you just said. Did you do some what we call trauma processing when you were writing that?
Oh yeah. I mean, pretty much that's my entire career is trauma processing. Like I've made a nice little living out of that. But I think yeah, the central issue in my books is often something that I'm either working through personally or that I'm sort of watching culturally get processed or in, close circles. And I think a lot of times I like to write characters who take sort of the same event or the same type of trauma and come at it from different angles. That's something that I see a lot in my characters. I don't always set out to do it, but that's what I sort of find as we're working through it. But last year, my family and I were supposed to be living in Spain, and we lost our visa. We failed to secure residency after we had already rented out our house for the year. So we ended up in a situation where we weren't homeless, but we were definitely housing insecure, sleeping on parents' couches, friends' couches for a while. And it was a rough year. And so you definitely the characters in Quiver have probably the biggest romance healing arc of any book I've written in a long time. And you can kind of see that journey reflected there. Informed Consent is, it was actually started during that year and I stopped because I wasn't in the right place to write it. And so when we came back home, last spring, I picked up Informed Consent again, and these characters are just joy. They're good-hearted women who I put through some absolute torture. emotionally, but they are both just so kind and good and caring. They're both therapists, and so um, watching them, watching two fundamentally wonderful women navigate a fundamentally horrifying start to a relationship was, it was kind of fun. The similar sort of trajectory in the book, like it starts beautifully, descends badly, and then you see them sort of come out of that, because it's a romance. It's not a spoiler for me to tell you. It ends really happily.
My husband and I have been watching Bridgerton, and he's like, "Why do you keep watching? You know what the end's gonna be like." I was like, "For the drama in the middle, of course."
Yes. Yes, of course. I mean, don't we all want to believe that we are worthy of love, that we are worthy of being swept off our feet? Like that's, I mean, that's why I write queer romance. Like I believe that queer people deserve happy endings.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, can you identify as non-binary? You use they them pronouns. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to discovering your identity and your expression?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still on it, still very much on it. It's and in fact in it. I'm in it deeply in ways that like I didn't have the space to be in the last couple years. But now that we're home, back in therapy, back in a secure place, I'm feeling it sort of evolve again. But I definitely it came out like roaring into the lesbian community. I very much like the day I was living in a very small town in Illinois, and the day I got my acceptance letter to my university, I emailed the pride president at the university, like, when do we meet? And she was like, you're not coming to school for 6 months, calm down. But I roared into the lesbian community. People told me I was a butch or a soft butch or a tomboy, like all of these things. And I was like, cool, yeah, I love it. Let's go. Y'all seem to like me, and I like being liked. So I jumped in to the community. I found, you know, at the time we were calling it lesfic. And I was too poor, and there weren't a ton of books out yet. So I just started writing my own to kind of entertain myself. And I got published, and suddenly like things took off. It just really, I was writing lesbian romances. I was coming out broadly. I met my wife, and this whole community was just so wonderful and affirming for me that I think it took me a long time to realize that parts of it didn't always fit. And I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose the first place that I had really felt affirmed. So it took me a long time to realize that none of the labels that other people were applying to me felt 100% comfortable. And so, um, really quite slowly, I began to explore a little bit. I think everything really sort of came to a head about 5, 6 years ago. I was going to a big family event where I had to dress up, and like we were past the point where anyone really expected me to wear a dress. But I was just struggling really hard to be like, a suit and tie feels too much in this situation. Like I was looking for ways to mitigate, I was looking for ways to tone down. And I actually said something on Facebook like, hey guys, you know, is it better to wear a vest and no tie? And some family members saw it and took offense that I was like, I don't know, talking publicly about a family event. And it became this huge blow up, like back channels and things. And I just kind of broke open. And my wife, this was the weekend before Women's Week. I went to the event. I left early. You know, I tried to be a good family member, show up. But I was just devastated that like I felt like I was getting attacked for processing, and that was kind of horrible because I was struggling so much. And on our way back from Women's Week, my wife was finally like, this isn't working. We need to get some help. I can't, I don't know the answers. You don't know the answers. And we don't even know how to talk about it, right? That's the thing. It's not like I was trying to choose between things that I understood. I was looking for something more expansive. And so at that point, she pretty much dragged my reluctant ass to therapy, and I fought it pretty hard. I've got a lot of Midwest baggage about not telling strangers your business and all of this stuff, and um, but after a couple sessions, I was like, this is going to get better, right? We found an amazing therapist right away and started having real serious conversations, even not even about gender identity, but understanding sort of the baggage we bring culturally, the baggage. She talked a lot about the baggage of a Midwest upbringing, and like this idea that I don't know where you guys all grew up, but I was like, I don't have any baggage from growing up in the Midwest. I had a great childhood. And she was like, did anybody tell you that you needed to eat what was on your plate and be grateful for it? And I was like, oh shit. Yes. Yes, I heard that all the time. I heard that all the time. And she's like, well, that's a life mentality that like you have to accept the choices that you're given and that you have to accept what was prescribed for you and you have to she's like, did anybody ever be like, do you think you're better than us? Why isn't what we did for a living good enough for you? Why isn't where we live good enough for you? And I was like, oh yeah. And she's like, those fundamental ideas, I think were really shaping my ideas around gender too. Like I got two choices, and why do I think I deserve a third one? Why do I think I deserve better? It's good enough for literally everyone else in my life. Why can't I just accept what I've been given? And so that was it's a real journey that I'm still on. But that was where I really began to think about other options, middle options, androgyny, fluidity, and things that didn't hem me in. And I'm still figuring those things out.
It's got to be really intense to try to change something that's been ingrained in you since like birth, because you've just been hearing these things over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, and some of it was affirming, right? Like I see these young people on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, and they're talking about these things about how like they're so miserable in their lives and they feel like they're going to die if they don't get top surgery, and they feel like, they're getting split in two. And I was very much, like I have a great life. I have a great family. I have an amazing marriage. I have a fantastic son. Why would I mess with this? Like, why? I have the best job in the whole world. I have a brilliant community of people who like me and follow me on social media and think that I'm a good person. Why would I risk all of this to dive into this sort of unknown gray space, this liminal area that might put me on the outside? And so I'm combating this cultural stuff. And I'm also, in some ways, it sounds weird, but battling comfort, right? Because there's a complacency that can come with that. But if you sit in that long enough, it's no longer comfortable, right? I think we're naturally driven to keep evolving.
How do you feel realizing accepting your identity has had an impact on your mental health?
It depends on the day. I mean, it really, like, I still very much don't talk about any of this as past tense or finished. I think that it's an ongoing thing for me. And there are days when I just love everything and everybody, and my life is amazing, and I feel so grateful. And then there are days um, when it's still incredibly hard, and that my gender dysphoria, I do have some physical gender dysphoria. Um, so I live outside of Buffalo now, and it's cold here a lot of the time. It's cold. So I go 6 months in hoodies, sweatshirts, baggy jackets, and things, where my body is, just a lump. And from the visible outside, I'm just a lump of hoodie. And then suddenly this week it hit 86 and I was in a t-shirt, and suddenly I had a body that was visible, and it was profoundly uncomfortable, right? I was forced to reckon with parts of myself that I have dissociated from, and that was a bad mental health day, right? And that was, thank God again that I had therapy on Tuesday and we were able to kind of talk through some of that, and figuring out how that is evolving. So I think that getting to a space where I have healthy outlets, where I have a support system, where I have people that I can talk to more openly, certainly having friends that I can comfortably call and say, the gender dysphoria is horrible today. That has done tremendous work. So coming out and having that awareness in my social group helps me not get stuck in that shame cycle anymore, because I've learned how to say, hey, and I did earlier this week, I texted a friend and said, shame spiral. And she was like, okay, all right, pick one thing. Tell me about one thing at a time. And so that level of being open and authentic has been really helpful for my mental health.
It's amazing. We keep coming back to how community, having those people that you can just drop in real quick and be like, this is, happening. And I just need to say it. Like, I just need to say it.
Oh, silence breeds so much shame, right? Shame loves to live in darkness. It's a little gremlin. And it's amazing how when I find the nerve to say it out loud, like I've literally changed nothing. I've changed nothing about my physical state. I've changed nothing about my reality, but just being able to tell someone that I am feeling shame, I am feeling vulnerability, I am feeling guilt, like just putting the light on it. It's like cockroaches, they start to scatter.
They talk about a lot of that in short-term narrative therapy, which is the goal is just to name what they label as the problem, which can be anything, right? It can be a feeling, emotion, an event, whatever. But as soon as you put a label to it, a name to it, and you start calling it by that, it actually eases up a lot of the discomfort and the pain that comes with it.
Yeah, and I think I hear all the time people who are tremendously secure saying things like, why do we need labels? Why can't we just be people? And I just, I understand where that comes from. And I also think that it speaks to a ton of privilege, right? To be able to say that I can move through the world without having to figure out who I am or what to call myself. That's a great privilege, and I'm glad that you have it. But some of us need to figure out how to conceptualize ourselves in a way that makes sense and a way that can be communicated to other people. So I think, yeah, the act of labeling ourselves, labeling what we're going through, even being able to say, I have gender dysphoria is a tremendous anchor to be able to know where to jump forward once I can say that.
It's I still really struggle with actually labeling my body issues as gender dysphoria, because I think so much of the stuff we see on social media, and it's great that it's so out there these days, there's more and more people talking about it and stuff. And this was kind of one of my kind of first issues I had when I was trying to figure it all out, was I didn't feel that it was enough.
Oh yeah.
And so it's not that, because I don't want to have top surgery, and I don't want to transition fully, and I don't, all these things which people talk about and tick off, and it was just like I don't feel any of that. Like, it's not that extreme, so therefore that's not what it is, because that's all we're seeing, like under that umbrella, under that term gender dysphoria. That's what we see, the extremes of it, and they're very valid, but there's less talk about the subtle gender dysphoria. I, like, in the group chat the other day, like I literally text, and like I'm sure Katie thought I was just like having a moment, and I'm like, what I really need is like something. Why am I googling underwear which is going to make my hips look slimmer? There's nothing that works to do that, because
Yeah,
that
actually, I saw that the other day.
Yeah, I'm like great, like you can get ones which make them look rounded, but mine are rounded enough, and I'm sure there's women out there who would love my cinched in waist and my rounded hips, but personally today I'm really hating
Yeah, yeah, and I actually saw, so my gender dysphoria is exclusively on the upper part of my body, but I saw that they were advertising, I don't know, that they looked to me like hockey shorts, but they were to make things look straighter, like through the
Yeah.
waist straight down. And I was like, damn, somebody thought of that. Somebody like looked at themselves in the mirror and had this horrible feeling that I'm very familiar with and was like, I can fix it. And there might be other people out there who are feeling the same thing. And I thought that that was really, really cool that that is happening, because I think you're right. I think this idea that that's the great thing about fluidity, right? Is that we don't all have to be in the same place, and that we don't all have to experience our bodies the same way every day. I experience my body very differently in January than I do in July, right? And it's really, my wife and I were just talking about this on our walk this morning, that in certain of our sort of creative outlets or whatever, she is way more what you would consider traditionally butch or masculine of center. She like she's putting in our toilet, she's got a wood shop in the basement, like she's constantly building things. She just bought like a bed at an estate sale that she's turning into a bench seat. Like there's power tools going on in my basement all the time, and I never touch any of them. But and like I was like, that's fine, honey. I got a bath bomb. I'm gonna go get in the bubble bath and listen to some Taylor Swift and read a romance novel. And like, but when we go out, I'm putting on a tie. I'm very uncomfortable. I bind my chest. She's gonna put on a skirt and she's gonna do her hair. She comes down, her hair is in rollers, she's putting on her makeup. And like so much of this is just so socially constructed, right? And it's a lot of unlearning that there's nothing inherently male about working in a wood shop, and there's nothing inherently female about soaking in a bathtub. There's just these cultural things that you have to unpack and spend this time saying like, well, am I really this thing, or do I have some cultural stuff? Do I have some stuff from childhood? Um and yeah, the idea of am I enough of a thing is huge. Like I'm still very much um so I have been diagnosed with persistent gender dysphoria, and when I went into like that sort of assessment, I remember thinking they'll probably say no. They'll probably say no because I don't want to go on testosterone. I don't want to grow a beard. I don't want to pass for male. They're probably going to tell me I don't have gender dysphoria. And both of these practitioners were like, "Oh, you've got classic dysphoric tendencies." And I was like, "Do I? Am I?" And they were like, "Yeah, yeah, you do." And I like had this moment where I was like, I just never knew if I was enough to count. And they were both like, "Yeah, you get to decide. You get to decide what terms fit best for you."
I sometimes describe it both to myself and to other people who ask about it, is because I think sometimes when you talk to someone about it and you go, I don't want to be, I don't want to use female pronouns or titles or anything, their brain instantly goes, again, because we see the extremes. Oh, does that mean you want to use male ones, or like starting point, end point, and you're going to go from here to there, and that's what the end goal is. And I try to go, it's not that I want to be male, I am more masculine presenting. I have always been that way, even before I kind of had my moment of revelation. But it's not about being necessarily more masculine. Some days it's just about being less feminine, like moving slowly along from moving from this end more towards the other end. But I'm not aiming to go like to the other end entirely.
Yeah, and we had a panel at GCLS last year that was fantastic, where we had different people sort of along the non-binary spectrum, and we had one person who was like, I think of myself as fully both genders, and that on different days I will present differently because both of these things live inside of me, and I'm learning to be comfortable with this complete duality. And then we had someone else on the panel who was like, I think of myself as agendered. I don't have a gender the same way someone might be asexual. I just consider myself as genderless. And so I could see people like being like, wait a second, is it both? Is it neither? And really being able to talk about the fact that this is what you get when you're working with a spectrum, that you can get people who are all up and down that spectrum. And that's what I hope we're creating space for, is the freedom to say everything in the middle is fair game. And I actually saw a great post, I think it was on Tumblr. I feel like I'm too old to be on Tumblr, but I sneak in there anyway when the kids aren't looking. And it was a person who had top surgery, and they had long blonde hair, and they were wearing men's shorts, the top surgery chest, and like some jewelry, some of which would have been considered feminine and some of which would have been considered very masculine. But it was like all over the place, and they had titled it, "I Don't Owe You Androgyny," and I was like, that is such a brilliant statement. Like, I don't owe you a performance of neutrality. I don't owe you a performance of anything. Like, I can live fully in these gendered extremes and still make space for both of them, right? Or you could be completely in the middle, and that's okay too. But this idea that there's a right way to look feminine and there's a right way to look masculine, we have to fight really hard to say there's no right way to look gender fluid.
So you are very public with a lot of things, which always amazes me. I'm quite the opposite. I'm very reserved. Like, I don't share my kids' names, I don't share my spouse's name. But you're very open, and you kind of always have been. How did you work through kind of reconciling your personal identity and your journey and your transformation and your coming more fully into authenticity with that public persona as well? Because it's kind of almost, it's a duality that you're kind of running at the same time.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. It really is. I was in college when Facebook was made. So I was in college when you had to have a .edu address to get on Facebook. And so I'm living that life with my friends. And then suddenly readers are finding me. And then suddenly we're promoting books on Facebook. And so social media, which was a really authentic space for me very early on, became a very, public facing space, and those worlds. And now, like, my grandma's on there. And so it's my Facebook audience has shifted, my Instagram audience has shifted drastically over the years. So I don't know that I initially made a great choice to be fully public, because I was just existing. I was married, I was pregnant, when the first readers found me on social media. But since then, yeah, it's constantly trying to live authentically, trying to be as much of myself as I can be. And also, like when my son was little, I would never post anything while I was live at a place. I never posted anything with his school on it. Now he's 16, and I trust that he's not getting in a car with a stranger. And so, like, just in the last few years, I finally posted pictures of him in like his uniform, his tennis uniforms and things that say his school. But it's definitely been grappling from the family side. My wife is always like, don't tell anybody on Facebook it's my birthday. I don't want to handle that shit, And so, like, we have these conversations and we navigate that. She's much more introverted than I am. But when I started to come out as non-binary, it was scary. It was really, really scary, because I make my living writing lesbian fiction. And there are people in our community who are wildly transphobic. And if it were just me personally, it would be very easy to tell them, am I allowed to cuss on this podcast? It would be very easy to tell them exactly where they could go and what they could do to themselves. but I pay for my kids' tennis shoes. I pay my bills with this community. And so when your livelihood is tied up in that, it suddenly gets a lot harder to balance between like what's authentic, what do I owe people. Um, I wrote plain English during COVID, and that has a non-binary character, and it was just really natural and authentic to me. But then when it came out, before it came out, we almost pulled it because there was this fear that it was too revealing, that it was too much. I'd put too much of myself in it, and if it crashed, um, it could really hurt my place in the community. I also stepped away from GCLS, which has been my professional organization for 16 years. Like I've really been big in that community, and it was they were going through some growing pains too. They ended up coming down on the side of being welcoming, but they lost people. There's some folks who have reviewed all of my early books that don't review my stuff anymore, and it was scary. I didn't honestly didn't know if I would ever go back to GCLS, but a new board came on. We got some more open-minded folks, more inclusive folks, and I did end up going back at Albuquerque, and I'll be there this year. And those conversations, I don't know that I ever set out to really transition publicly, but these are the spaces that I exist in, and learning to be authentic in them it's ongoing, right? This is something that we're still, again, none of this is past tense. I've changed, well, here's an example. Like I've changed my name on Facebook. So I still have an author page for Rachel Spangler. But my friends and family, everybody in my life, my colleagues all call me Ray. That's the name that I'm comfortable with. It's not the name that's on the books. And that is something we're all still trying to figure out how to navigate, right? I want people to be able to find my books. So I don't think of Rachel Spangler as a dead name. But more and more I think of it as a pen name, right? I always joke that I did a reverse pen name, that the biological name is, or the birth name is on the books, and I grew into a different name. So most people grow up their whole lives and then choose the name for the books. I did it backwards. I have the whole life name on the book, and then I've chosen the name that my friends and family, and honestly most of my readers now who have followed that journey call me Ray. So that it's a space that we're constantly navigating. People on panels say, what do I call you? I'm like, well, if we're selling books, it's Rachel. If we're chatting, it's Ray.
Yeah, I think I asked you that same question when I was moderating the panel. I was like,
Yeah.
what name would you prefer me to call you and introduce you by? But yeah, I think the Sapphic community has blossomed in the last few years, and it has been wonderful to see, and I have loved seeing it, and I can't wait for it to continue to blossom in ways that it hasn't yet, and continue to grow even more, because I think it needs to desperately.
Yeah, and I've been really heartened in the last few years. It was like there were a few years where it was so disheartening. I just felt beat down. I felt like I had to hide parts of myself. I feel like we've had such a turnaround in the last 3 or 4 years that it's becoming just a fundamentally different space. And I don't know that we've seen the full transformation yet.
I don't think we have. At least I
Yeah.
think we haven't.
And it's, I obviously think of it from the gender binary, but I know, friends, like the bisexual representation and the asexual representation is growing in leaps and bounds too. And it's just really exciting to see people that I've known and worked with and written with. I mean, some of these people for 15 years beginning to step into some of their other identities too. And that's just, it's been great.
What are your hopes and dreams for like the trans umbrella community in the future?
Yeah, this is a great question I've been thinking about, that I think it comes down to freedom, right? I think I want people to have the ability to play and explore. I feel like right now we're at a place where we have to work so hard to fight to say, I am trans. This is my name. This is my identity. This is my pronouns. And you damn well better stick to it because you've just put your neck out there and made this big declaration. I would rather see, and honestly, this is for the queer community across the board. But where people are allowed to have fluidity, people are allowed to try things on. People are allowed to say, hey, we had a friend's kid who went through like 3 different names before he found the one. Like he tried a really gender neutral name, and then he tried a really hard one, and then like a really masculine one, and then he settled back down into like this middle space of a name. And people grumbled. I'm like, that kid is 19. Let him figure it out. Let him play. Let him try things on the same way he would try on clothes or his emo phase, right? Like you let the kid figure it out and give them the full range of options. Like, don't be so quick to make people lock in. People keep asking my 16-year-old like what he's going to be doing with his life when he's 40. No, stop it. Shut up. Let him have fun. Let him learn and grow. And maybe some people who have pigeonholed themselves into things for 40 years might find that they still have some exploring left to do too. I would just really like for us to be able to have a lot more flexibility and to almost have a sense of play around some of these things. Try it, buzz your head, see if it works. No, you don't like it, your neck looks like a pack of hot dogs. Okay, that's not what you were hoping for. Like, try something else, grow your hair long, shave the sides, like wear suit and tie, wear a skirt the next night. Like, I just want the freedom to really not get hemmed into anything until you find the thing that feels good for you in that time of your life.
I have said this before, and I will say it repeatedly, that the ability to explore gender identity and sexuality in this upcoming generation is one of my favorite things about this generation. The number of kids that I have worked with that come up to me and they're like, this week I feel like a female and this is my name. And then the next week they're like, that did not really set so well. So we're going to go to this direction and try this way. And I'm like, do it, play,
Yeah.
explore, take the time to figure out who you are and who you want to be, and then work toward that. There's nothing wrong with it, and then maybe they won't end up like us cranky millennials, and that will be even better.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love to see, and we live in a place where the high school has a gay straight alliance. There's a lot of fluidity, and there's also some pushback from some older folks, so it's not an easy path, but I see these kids playing in ways that I'm just so in awe of, and I'm so glad that they get to. They had a kid in the musical. They did Beauty and the Beast, and in one scene, this kid's in the ensemble. In one scene, they're definitely dressed as a boy, and in another scene, they're definitely dressed as a girl, and both looked really cool. And I know that they've let that kid, like, they look at the scene and they're like, "Where do you want to go?" And that kid is like, there. No, this one I'm over there." And I'm like, how much better would all of our lives been if we had just been allowed to do that?
But also just to be able to have the agency to make a decision and not have it to be the final decision.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like,
that's why I push back so hard on this idea of like, how did you decide? And I was like, I'm still evolving. I don't know that any decisions have been fully made. I think I'm wearing what feels right now.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to wind it down, right?
yep, I think we're ready for the rapid fire.
Okay.
All right. So, rapid fire questions. Just, I'll ask you the question and you answer it. Doesn't have to be like a lot of thought into it.
Okay.
All right. What's your dream destination vacation?
I want to go all over the world, but right now I'm fixating on Iceland. I
You,
got 24 hours in Iceland and that was not enough. I saw just enough to know that I gotta go back.
you and me
Awesome.
both. My husband asked me where we're going for, he picked a place for his 40th. And I said, well, do I get to pick a place for my 40th? And he said, yeah, where are we going? I said, we're going to Iceland.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw just enough to be like, this needs to be a longer trip.
What's your trope, whether in your relationship or you as a person?
I always tell people that my favorite tropes in romance writing are age gap, ice queen, power dynamics, which also means I'm married extremely well.
I have met your partner, so I can agree.
Yeah. Yeah. She's older and she has her shit together.
Where did you see kindness today?
So I got up at 5 o'clock this morning to drive a friend to the airport in Buffalo, and I'm not a morning person. So you could say I showed some kindness there, but really she's got so much generosity and so much grace to her that I felt almost like she had done me a favor in the end, because she always makes me think of the world as a little softer, better place.
Oh, what's your philosophy on good mental health?
Go to therapy. For crying out loud. I think everybody needs to be in therapy right now because you deserve it. You deserve it. And I think, God, that's, like I said, there's always a romance in the book and there's always something, sort of a side thing that I'm working through. And in informed consent, I really hope that people take away the idea that you are good and you deserve the same level of care that you offer to everybody else, and you deserve that too. So go get it for yourself.
All right. And where did you find joy this week?
I find joy everywhere. I think, God, every morning that I wake up next to my wife, I am filled with joy. Every time that my kid comes across the room to show me a meme on his phone, I feel joy. And every time so we just last night we went out. It was so hot that we went out to Lake Erie with a group of friends and sat on a blanket and talked about our lives and our kids. And that was so joyful. Like there's so much finding wonder in the mundane that's the key to joy, right?
I like that. All right. So, okay, folks, that's all for our latest episode of Bookish and Unbalanced. We would love to thank Ray for sharing with us today. We also want to thank our listeners for tuning in and getting to know Ray just a little bit better than before. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to keep up to date on our latest episodes. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Until next time, take care out there. And remember, we are all in this together.
Now I take our papers and we throw them.
Okay, I got paper.